MLB, they've told these teams and they've set stuff to reporters. It's the same pants the last 10 years, but just different lighting and stuff like that.
Spring training is in full swing, as you both know, and there's a ton of exciting storylines to look at ahead of the 2024 season. So let's break down some of these together with a game of fair or foul. And joining me now are our resident experts, Bob Nightengale and Steve Gardner. Gentlemen, we appreciate you being here. I want to kick things off at the very top of MLB storylines. And of course, I'm talking about Shohei Ohtani and the Los Angeles Dodgers. So Bob, this team looks nothing short of frightening, and obviously Ohtani isn't the only top name they brought in this offseason. But that said, we know that anything can happen in the playoffs. But let's talk about the regular season first. So the 2001 Seattle Mariners still hold the record for the most regular season wins. The Dodgers kind of sniffed topping it in 2022 with 111 wins, but fair or foul, this 2024 Dodgers team can and will take away that record from the Mariners.
I'll say foul, just because they don't have to do it. They'll be resting guys and, probably go 6-man rotation. And I think nobody wants to burn themselves out. So I think that record's going to stand for a while. It was then, the only time it would be in jeopardy if a team was challenging them, like the Giants that year when the Giants won the division, when they won 107 games, Dodgers won 106. But the Dodgers will take 100 wins right now and just get prepared for the playoffs.
Yeah. And quick follow-up, Bob. I know you're still down at spring training, so could you just talk about the buzz around these facilities as the Ohtani mania kind of sweeps through spring training right now?
I'll tell you, I've never seen anything like it with the Dodgers. People are acting like Ohtani's never been here before. He was with the Angels for 6 years. There's a good 3,000, 4,000 people in the backfields watching the Dodgers take batting practice and things like that. You can't buy any Ohtani merchandise. It's all sold out. So people are going nuts. It's like the Yankees and Red Sox combined times 10. In that clubhouse, there's a good 70, 80 reporters in that clubhouse on a lot of days. So it's crazy.
That's amazing. Steve, obviously when Ohtani's hitting and pitching, it's hard to argue that he's not the most talented and valuable player in the world. But for my money, I think Ronald Acuna is right there too. His 2023 season, as we know, was completely insane. And for anyone who forgot, he finished the season with 41 homers, 106 RBIs, 149 runs scored, 71 stolen bases, which is crazy, all while batting .337. Madness. So Steve, fair or foul, is it impossible to think Acuna can match those numbers in 2024?
I'd have to think it's impossible. I mean, nobody has ever gotten to those levels in a single season ever before in baseball history. So I don't think lightning can strike twice. But that said, what numbers would he not be able to reach individually? I mean, he could still steal all of those bases, hit all those home runs, just not do them all together. And even if he does maybe come close on a couple of those, it's still an MVP caliber season. So I don't think we'll see any decline in performance from Ronald Acuna Jr., barring an injury or anything. And going into this season, I think he has to be the front runner for MVP again.
Yeah. And Steve, as our resident fantasy baseball expert, does anyone else even sniff consideration as a first name off the board, or is it 100% him?
Absolutely 100% Acuna. That season that he had a year ago was the greatest fantasy season in history by a huge margin. So I think now the question is, not only in just regular fantasy drafts does he go first, I think that the answer is obvious there, but if you go into fantasy auction drafts, how high does he go? Ooh. I mean, that could set another record in terms of recent fantasy history. He could be, certainly he's a $50 player, maybe even a $60 player in standard leagues.
Yeah. All right, Bob, I want to go over to the NL Central now. My heart hurts a little bit because I'm a Cardinals girl, but the Cubs just re-signed Cody Bellinger, who had a resurgent year with them in 2023. Now, the NL Central does seem somewhat up in the air, but fair or foul, bringing him back makes the Cubs the favorites to win the division.
I'll go foul, at least a slight foul ball on that. I think it's still wide open. I'm not going to put Pittsburgh in that picture, but I think you can make a case for the other four teams for sure. Right now, as I sit here, I'd probably pick the Cincinnati Reds. I mean, everybody knew Bellinger was going to come back. We'll see if Bellinger can put up the same numbers. Obviously, nobody thought he could, or else he would have got a lot bigger contract. I mean, even the Cubs were skeptical. So they're a good team, but it's the same team as they had last year. Added a couple players. But I think the Reds have as much a chance, and St. Louis, of course, picked up the 3 starters.
All right, let's talk about the stacked AL East. Steve, I guarantee that if baseball fans across the country had a backup team to root for, it's probably the Baltimore Orioles. What a fun young team this is, and they took that gigantic step forward last year, winning the division for the first time since 2014. That said, we know anything can happen in the AL East, but fair or foul, if we fast forward to the end of the regular season, do you think we'll be talking about the Orioles as back-to-back division champs?
I think there's a pretty good possibility. So I'd say fair. I mean, there still may be some more additions that they could make, maybe not before the season starts, but at the trade deadline to be an even better team. They have a little bit of an injury situation with Kyle Bradish, their number one starter, coming into this season. But the addition of Corbin Burns gives them a legitimate ace to where he feels like, to me, a guy that can take them even deeper into the postseason. Obviously, the early exit has to be in the back of their minds, or maybe the front of their minds coming into this season. And the talent is certainly there. You can add another one, too, in Jackson Holliday, the consensus number one prospect or number one or two in all of baseball, coming on to that team, just making a young team on the rise even better this season.
I like that. Sticking with the AL East, the Yankees maybe made the second biggest splash this offseason, trading for Juan Soto. It's an all-in move, in my opinion, seeing as he's basically a rental with no guarantee. He returns in 2025, but the Yankees fans will be quick to tell you they need more on specifically. And as of now, it seems like Blake Snell deal, it's not going to happen. But fair or foul, Bob, if the Yankees don't bolster their rotation somehow, it'll be another disappointing year in the Bronx.
I think that could be fair. I don't think they have enough pitching. I think they could use a Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery. Obviously, Jordan Montgomery's upset that they traded him in the first place, so I'm not sure that's going to happen. I don't completely rule out Blake Snell. We'll see what happens. They need another starter. They could turn and try to trade for Dylan Cease of the Chicago White Sox here at some point. And we'll see about Soto. I mean, living in Phoenix, I saw Soto a lot with the Padres. I mean, he was a disappointment. I mean, they didn't do anything with him. He needs to swing the bat. They don't need him to take walks like he did all the time in San Diego. No, he needs to be a lot more aggressive than he was at the Padres.
I'm glad you mentioned it because, Bob, when it comes to Soto, obviously money talks. So he could really land anywhere next offseason. But how vital is a deep Yankees playoff run or even a World Series appearance when it comes to convincing Soto to stay in New York, you think?
I think he stays in New York, but the other side of town. I think he likes the Mets a lot more. It's a National League city, less pressure than the Yankees. But he was disappointed when he got traded to the Yankees. He would have preferred just to stay in San Diego. We'll see what happens. The Mets have kind of saved their money to drop the payroll down. I think they're gearing up to try to go for him next year.
Steve, sticking in the other side of New York for a second, is there any chance, in your opinion, that we could be surprised by the Mets, or should fans be bracing for a really long season?
It seems to me that the Mets don't have what it takes, certainly, to compete with the big boys in Atlanta and Philadelphia in that division. So what we may see is maybe a little bit of a teardown. The real question, I think, and the drama in Queens for this season is what happens to Pete Alonso. Coming toward the end of his contract, he's the biggest trade chip that the Mets have. And, he's a player that doesn't particularly age that well. So if they're going to be competing for playoff spots in 2025, 2026, if that's what their timeline looks like, Pete Alonso may not be at the peak of his powers and may be on the way down by the time they're ready to compete. So I think the Mets need to develop their young players. And if that doesn't necessarily do everything for them, then they do have Pete Alonso that they can dangle out on the trade market to try and bolster that youth crop again.
Steve, everyone is so quick to talk about teams like the Dodgers, the Braves, or even the Astros as the odds-on favorites to win the World Series, which is kind of crazy. We're so quick to forget the Texas Rangers, but obviously history will tell you it's very hard to repeat as champs. No one has done it since the Yankees in 2000. So Steve, fair or foul, we have to say sorry to all Rangers fans because they're likely not the team to break that streak.
I think that's fair. The Rangers did get hot at the end of the season, although they did set their roster up to where they're going to get a lot of healthy pitchers, hopefully, in especially Max Scherzer, Jacob deGrom, toward the end of the season. So they're kind of looking toward October and being at their best again in the postseason. But no, I think the American League West is certainly a very strong and maybe even a stronger division than it was last year. Houston's always there. And my pick for kind of a dark horse is the Seattle Mariners, who didn't make the playoffs last year, but had a huge, has a huge rotation and pitching staff that could take a huge step forward this year. I like what Seattle's doing, and I think they're going to make an awful lot of noise in the West.
All right, finally, I want to talk about maybe the most important topic facing the MLB as spring training ramps up, and it's obviously the uniforms. We all know that the new unis that Fanatics and Nike rolled out have not been received very well. But Bob, you're on site there at spring training talking to these guys. So fair or foul, the whole uniform situation is just being overblown.
Very fair. You talk to guys, I asked Mookie Betts the other day, do you have a problem with the uniform? He goes, as long as I have a Major League Baseball uniform to wear, I'm happy. I don't care what it looks like. In MLB, they've told these teams, and they've set stuff to reporters. It's the same pants the last 10 years, but just, different lighting and stuff like that. So I think it's a way overblown. When Tony Clark talked to all of us the other day, he goes, hey, no uniform questions. We're done talking about it.
Hey, sports fans, if you want to see more conversations with athletes and stars, check out these videos right here and be sure to subscribe for more from USA Today Sports.